Hello everybody, it's Joel Toppin here. Thought I'd show you a little bit about what I've been working on here for GMT Games. This is Conquest and Consequences. It's a new title in the block game series by Craig Besinque. You'll remember Triumph and Tragedy came out some time ago. It's gone through a couple of printings and editions, and that's the European side of things. This is going to be the Pacific side of things. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here on the VASSAL modules, I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill the solo role. And what that will do is it'll give me access to the whole shebang. So you can see this is the final artwork here to the module. It's got great artwork here. So you can see the action cards are going to be held down here, investment cards up here. If you're familiar with Triumph and Tragedy, this is pretty much the same system, but now in the Pacific. And instead of 4 parties, now it's 3. You have the USA, which includes to an extent Britain. Britain's kind of takes the role. I'm not an expert on this game. I just have a cursory understanding of it. But my understanding is that it's kind of like how the USA is in Triumph and Tragedy. It's there. It's a major power. But it's not definitely a given that they're going to join the conflict. So you have Britain in here, but the main player seats are the USA, Japan, of course, and the Soviet Union. And as you can see, China is just a patchwork of different provinces and political entities. And so you see there's a lot of ground for diplomacy to gain influence in all these different places. So this is the VASSAL module. As I said, the blocks are going to be stored in block windows. These are private. Now I've signed in as solo, so it's giving me free access to everything. I've also set it up so that when you're in the module here and you're signed in, say as the Soviets, you can drag blocks out of here and then you can hide them. You should hide them in this window before deploying them on the map. Otherwise, your opponent will see them. And so this gives the player a little bit of privacy. So all the blocks for the Soviets are going to be in here. You can see they got 4 forts that they have access to. They have, this will also keep track, of the types of blocks. And your inventory is all going to be stored in here. You got 4 forts, 4 air forces, 2 submarines, 2 fleets, 4 armor, and 10 infantry. Now for the Communist Chinese, you also have 2 forts available. One's deployed on the map at the start. The other's in here. You have 2 air forces, 2 armor, 4 infantry, and 20 militia. One of them is already deployed on the map. So that's the Soviet blocks. The Japanese, they got a little bit of everything except militia. So they're going to have forts, air forces, carriers. You'll notice that most of their units are 3 pip units, but the exception being carriers and fleets can have up to 4 pips. They can be up to 4 strength. And they also have access to Marines and armor. Those are only 2 strength units. And so those are all in the Japanese blocks window. The USA has the most blocks to play with. And so they got a bunch of forts. Let's see, you got forts, you've got air forces, carriers, submarines, fleets, armor, infantry, Marines. They're all 4-step capable, with the exception of the Marines being 2-step capable units. Also see that they have the British. The British units are all 2-step capable units. And they have a little bit of everything except for Marines. And then the nationalist Chinese have forts, they're pretty much like the communist Chinese. They have forts, air forces, armor, infantry, and militia. And I can already see a couple of bugs I've got to fix. Looks like the American forts have an off-centered label. So I'm going to fix that. And it looks like the label counter for the Chinese armor needs to scoot over just a little bit. And I seem to recall, yeah, the Japanese and the Soviets are going to need little movement clearing buttons in their windows. So still debugging this particular module. In the hand windows, if I open up those, it's just like the European game. You can draw, you're going to draw a card off the deck, and what side of the button you press will determine what card actually gets drawn. So if I want to draw an action card, I click the left side. If I want to draw an investment card, I click the right. Cards are automatically drawn face down because of the sensitivity of their contents if you were to accidentally draw it on the map. and so forth. So you can flip the cards face up using this button, or you can right-click on the individual cards and do that. And you can see here that we have some diplomacy options, command options. For the technology or the investment card, you have sonar technology. You have, let's go ahead and rotate this card around so we can see the other side. We have autocannon AA. It'll basically turn your fleets into more capable anti-aircraft and turns your carriers into very capable anti-aircraft. And so there is your how you're going to be able to use the cards in the game, and the little hand windows will work pretty cool. One of the other things that the module will do, it's kind of slick. I've never implemented this before in the series of games. I'm gonna probably redo the European game here fairly soon in order to incorporate some of this. But if you right-click on any of the cadres at the beginning of the game, you're going to set the game up, and there's cadres that you can build, and that means you can take a one-step unit of any kind from your force pool, from your block window, if we can call it that, and you can deploy it onto the map. Well, if you want to do this manually, you'd have to open up the block window. You would have to take one of the blocks out. You would then have to hide it. The Control H does work even though it's grayed out in the right-click menu. That's when you're signed in as solo. So you get it flip face down, and you would drag it onto the map, and then you would, and that's how you deploy that onto the map. I have a slightly better system for this now. I'll return that guy to the force pool. The system I've got now, I'm going to just show it to you. I'm going to go ahead and sign in as the Japanese. So I'm no longer in the solo seat. That will make the blocks behave a little bit more accurately. So I'm going to go ahead and take the hide button up here, and I'm going to click it on the main toolbar, and that's going to hide all my blocks, all my Japanese blocks, I should say, on the map. So I'm going to drag a couple of these out so you can see what I'm talking about, and I'll show you how the cadres work. So go ahead and zoom in here. So you can see when they're hidden, there's going to be just a little hidden box with question marks that goes around the label of the unit. That tells me that I can see it. I can see it. So this is a 1-pip Air Force. This is a 1-pip Navy. Over here in Tokyo, we have a 4-pip fleet and a 3-pip carrier fleet. And so these are all face down to my opponent. So even though I can see them, someone that's signed in as the United States or as the Soviets, another player, in other words, will only see the backside of my block. It'll just be a yellow, plain yellow block, kind of like what you saw when I flipped it and I was signed in as the solo player. So it's really important to keep your blocks hidden. Now, what am I going to build here in, what is that, Hylar? Up here, what am I going to build here? If I right-click on any of the cadres, I can choose to deploy a Ford, Air Force, carrier, submarine, fleet, tanks, infantry, marine to that block. Now, the user will want to keep this window open, or at least keep in mind their inventory, because if you try to deploy a block when there's 0 available, the cadre is just going to disappear and nothing's going to be deployed. And so the resolution then would be to legally deploy manually one of the blocks from this window, being sure to hide it before you put it on the map. To streamline things, what I've done is I've set it up so you can right-click, and let's say up here, I don't want to deploy a fleet because where would I go with it? It can't move anywhere, so it's landlocked. So I won't want to deploy any naval units, but maybe I want to put some tanks in there. So I'll go ahead and deploy some tanks to watch those Soviets on the border. And lo and behold, you'll see it deployed one from my force pool, and it flipped it face down, so my opponents are none the wiser. It just says that something was deployed to Hylar. And so that's just kind of a slick little system that I built in to expedite this setup. All the players can be doing that simultaneously around the board, and that will greatly speed up gameplay. Rather than having to drag things out of their force pool, everything's going to happen there. I've got a few more tweaks to make to the module. There are a few markers to place in the game. They're all found in the markers tray. You can drag these onto the board. I think I might make those placeable by clicking on blocks to make that a little bit more streamlined. I've yet to implement that. Still waiting for some bug feedback from some other users. Also, the neutral blocks are located in here, as well as the turn order block, which you can flip so as to reverse the turn order. So If you're going around the table clockwise, you would have it on this side. If you're going counterclockwise, you'd flip it to the other side, and so forth. Peace dividends, if you played the European game, they work pretty much the same way. When you draw it off the deck, it is face down, but you can right-click on it and peek at it to see what it says on the other side. When you peek at it, no one else is any the wiser. It doesn't report anything to anyone else. One last thing I've done to this module is I've made the perimeter of the module have like a border that will reflect that particular side of the table, if you will. So there's a lot going on with the USA. So there's room down here to put all your investment cards and your diplomacy cards. You can drag stuff around the board, and there's lots of room down here. If you wanted to, you could even organize your blocks down here. I just wanted to provide some extra space. You can put your peace dividends down here. The Japanese, I gave them just about as much room because they're going to be having a lot of action going on diplomatically and otherwise, so they have that room. And then the Soviets don't need quite as much, Craig said, so we've decided to give them this space on the left-hand side of the map. The artist was gracious enough to flip all of the numbers to the upright side. All the charts are upright to the user, so everything's easy to read on the map. I still have the play aids to put in, but this is just a quick look at Conquest and Consequences by GMT Games. It's a big sandbox diplomacy in the 1930s and 40s. Can World War II happen? Absolutely. Will it happen? Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be a war for one of the players to win. It's just a wide open, lots of cool stuff can happen. Not a lot of rules overhead. So if you want a cool alt history game set in the 1930s and 40s, I would encourage you to check out Triumph and Tragedy and check out Conquest and Consequences. I'm Joel Toppin. Hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more. We'll be posting some more info about this game as the day of its release gets sooner upon us. And again, hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to GMT's channel. Really appreciate your subscriptions. Give us a thumbs up. It really helps promote the channel.